All right, good morning, everybody. This is Committee of Adjustment, and we're going to get started right away. Application SG 2018-008, that's for 333 Manitou Drive. If you're in support or opposition, please join us. Support to my right, opposition to my left, please. Great, thank you.
Good morning, honorable committee members. My name is Dave Izard. I am with a company called Media City. We are the owners of the existing billboard that is on 353 Manitou / 333 Manitou. I have provided just a brief summary of some of the key points that we would like to point out for this sign. The first page being the closest distance to residential. This is in an industrial area that is at least 0.8 kilometers away from any residential, with a lot of dense forest to the south as well. The second page will show you the size before and after the sign was changed. As you can tell, the overall size did not change at all. It was just the digital content that was changed, and part of the reason for this was for Media City to be a bit more competitive. In the city of Kitchener, they allow signs up to 10 feet by 40 feet, and you see those in and around Kitchener. Ours is 10 feet by 20 feet, which is a standard size throughout the industry. Third page just basically tells you exactly what we do. 64% of all of our advertising is local advertising. We are a small Canadian-owned business that will utilize our space for some national advertisers, but a lot of our stuff is very local and Kitchener specific. Country Boy Restaurants, Medics College, Kelly Services, the Kitchener Amphitheater, Dietrich Law Offices, all are examples of businesses that are located here. And the last one was just a short visual of typical signs from competitors that are in southwestern Ontario. My only thing is that staff has recommended approval of this variance, and we think that that's a good idea as well.
Great, thank you. Is there any questions or comments from the committee members that make a recommendation to approve subject to conditions?
I have no comments. I'm happy to make a motion to approve, to recommend.
I have a couple of comments and questions first. I remember when this application came before this committee a number of years ago. There was quite some discussion. The bylaw at that time, which I understand has changed, pretty much the approach from City Council was that billboards were not a desirable means of communication and marketing within the city. A compromise was reached with the committee at that time that the amount of changing copy sign or the LED sign was to be restricted to much smaller than what the applicant is proposing at this point. Through you, Mr. Chair, I have a question for the applicant, actually. What you're proposing is that 100% of the 10 by 20 foot old technology, I'm not sure what that is in meters, 100% of that will be an LED sign on the one face, and my question is, what will be on the other?
Yes, you're correct. On the one face it will be 100%, and on the other face it will be a static first-party sign.
Sorry, I missed that last.
A static first-party sign.
Okay.
So it will be for the actual property owner for his use.
Through you, Mr. Chair, to staff, do we have any 10 by 20 foot LED billboards within the city limits at this point?
I am not able to answer your question because I haven't done an inventory of these types of signs. So I do not know if we have a sign of this size elsewhere in the city. But we do have other large signs within the municipality. But whether or not it meets this exact size, I can't confirm today.
I'm generally asking about third-party promotional signs, especially LED signs. But it is possible there may be others within the community. And my next question would be to staff, if we approve this for the one side of the sign, and the applicant wants to put one on the other side of the sign, would that mean a separate approval of the committee and council?
Yes, it would. Yeah.
So this is approval for just
For the
one
side.
face?
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah.
Okay. Through you, Mr. Chair, a comment maybe to staff for their opinion on this. As over the last number of years, LED lights or changing copy signs have become more prevalent within the community. I recall on many occasions we put in restrictions, such as the copy has to be static for at least 6 seconds, and that the changing copy portion of the signs, in this case would be 100%, would go off at midnight and then come back on at 6 o'clock in the morning or thereabouts. So, Mr. Chair, through you to staff, would it be appropriate for this particular application to implement those conditions that we have done on many other occasions for changing copy signs? That's my question to staff.
Through you, Mr. Chair, we have had those types of conditions, I agree. I believe those were situations where the signs were located in closer proximity to residential areas, which this clearly isn't. This is an industrial park, which I think it's almost a moot point, but if the committee so chooses, you can impose conditions that you feel are appropriate. But that would be the scenario under which we had approved applications in the past with those types of conditions, where there was close proximity to residential areas.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I appreciate the situation that this is quite different, or somewhat different, insofar as it's not in or close to a residential area. I am concerned somewhat about quickly changing copy on signs can be a distraction. So, Mr. Chair, I would like to suggest an amendment to this, or a third condition, that the copy on the changing copy portion of the sign be static for at least 6 seconds to avoid blinking and constantly changing, distracting messages. Through you, Mr. Chair, that's my amendment to this. Other than that, I would go ahead with this.
Thank you. Do you have any issues with that?
No issues. Just to, through you, Mr. Chair, to let the member know that there is another sign that is on the staff report that is digital and that they have included in the report. So the other sign that you see on the front page of the staff report is digital as well. So I don't know if that, I just don't want to be restricted to a point where we're not competitive anymore. You're talking about our competitor that is, it's a very large national company that, probably has, a lot of lawyers and stuff that could fight this type of thing, where, all we're trying to do is compete with people that, maybe not have Kitchener in their heart as we do.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I'm not informed of the particulars of the one that is 200 meters down the road, down Manitou. I don't know whether it has come through the Committee of Adjustment. I don't recall it having come through. That notwithstanding, this committee makes decisions based upon each individual application. I understand the need for being competitive within any industry, as do all of the members of this committee. I'm going to make the suggestion. Actually, I'm going to make a motion that this be approved with the extra condition that the changing copy portion of the sign, the digital media portion of the sign, the messages be no shorter than the 6 seconds as we have prescribed on many other LED signs within the community. So that's my motion as amended.
Through you, Mr. Chair, just for clarity, I'd like to understand the basis in this particular case for having that additional condition. We know that the variance relates only to the distance of the sign to the next closest sign, so only a distance variance. There's no variance for the change copy, and there's no variance for the size of the sign. And we've heard from staff that there's no residential in close proximity. So I just want to understand the nature or the basis for imposing this condition under those circumstances. Is it safety? Is it for distracting traffic? If that's the case.
Through you, Mr. Chair, yes, that's my major concern, is a safety issue through distracting traffic. Manitou is a very busy road, and I'm just worried about the future. I'm not going to say that this might set a precedent moving forward, but I don't think it's terribly onerous on the applicant to program their messages that they remain static for at least 6 seconds. It's just to get away from flashing lights. Because creative people can imagine all kinds of interesting things that if there's no restrictions on the rapidity of the message. So I hope that answers my colleague's question and concerns. It is one of safety and distraction.
I have a question for the applicant. Is this the existing sign? Is this across the street from or beside where the old CAA building is by the Spainer? Is that the location?
Yes, it is.
Yeah, okay. And that currently has a change copy, and it's a flashing sign and things like that. Mm-hmm. That sign that is existing is a digital sign. It does have flash copy, changes sporadically through probably a 6-second window. It's a realistic timeline and things like that. Okay, thank you. Can we get a motion?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I would move that this application be approved with one extra condition, that the changing copy portion of the sign be restricted to no less than 6 seconds per message, whatever the wording is that we have used on previous applications.
Mr. Chair, with respect to my colleague, I'm not going to support the motion as amended. I don't have any evidence before me that there is an issue with safety or distraction for having no such restriction to the time frame, and I don't think it's fair to unnecessarily inhibit the competitiveness of this particular project. So.
Thank you. Okay, so Mr. Bob McCall's motion, let's all vote on it. All in favor? Oh, hold on. We didn't get... Okay, I'm not going to second it. I tend to favor... okay, so then new motion, please.
Motion to approve application DSD 18082. Subject to the two conditions set out in the staff report.
Second? I second that. All in favor? It's passed. Please note that we make recommendation to council. Council makes the final approval on August 27th at 7 o'clock. This will go in front of council with a recommendation to approve. I would recommend that you be there just in case something were to happen or anything. August 27th at 7 o'clock. Okay. Great, thank you. All right, application 2018-070, 2007. Centennial Court. Anybody in support or opposition? Good morning.
Good morning.
If you could just state your name for the record, please.
Katie Fitzpatrick from Witzel Dice Engineering on behalf of the owner, Mike Tico.
Thank you. Have you had an opportunity to read the staff report? They're making recommendation to approve.
Yes.
There's no conditions for approval. Anybody, anything from the committee?
Mr. Chair, I have no concerns with this application. I'm prepared to support its approval. I just had some, just for context, I was wondering a bit about the history of the site and the consolidation. Do you, ma'am, do you know when the site was consolidated, the two properties were consolidated? And prior to consolidation, was the currently vacant portion ever developed?
It's currently in the process of being consolidated. The portion that is at the front is currently undeveloped right now. So we are in the process of a site plan application right now currently with the two lots, and that's one of our compliances is to have the two lots consolidated.
So the lots are not currently one?
I'd have to double check. I believe they are not, they're in the process right now, but I'm not 100% sure on that.
Is there anything further?
Yes, Mr. Chair. Just for a matter of consistency, of late, last couple of years, for applications like this, we always add the condition of that the applicant obtain a building permit. There's many of our applications here today that that is a condition. So I would approve this or move that this be approved with the addition of one condition, and that's that the applicant get a building permit.
Yes, we will be getting a building permit.
Julianne, could you comment on that? Do we require a building permit or a site plan? Sorry, pardon me, a building permit?
The building division asked for a building permit. Through you, Mr. Chair, the building division asked for a building permit.
Yeah, it's for prior to construction.
It's kind of a standard comment from them.
Yeah,
So,
for sure. So as the staff report stands then? Or would you like that as part of the condition of approval?
Seeing the building department asked for a building permit, and we're doing that all the time these days, I would move this application be approved with the one extra condition that the applicant get a building permit.
Second?
I'll second the motion.
All in favor? Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Application A 2018-071, 545 Trillium. In support or opposition? Good morning.
Good morning.
Have you had an opportunity to read the staff report?
I have.
They're making a recommendation to approve subject to certain conditions. Are you in agreement with this report? Do you have anything to comment on?
I did have some questions of clarification. One of the conditions was the building permit. If there is no actual construction, we're using the office as is that still required?
Julianne?
through you, Mr. Chair, the building permit was required for a change of use. Is there a change of use going on in the property?
As far as the zoning is concerned, yes. As far as the actual use of the building, no.
Well, you can discuss it with our building staff, and they can clear off the condition. That was a request.
Okay. That was my only question.
I'd also like to note that the GRCA's got their hand out looking for a fee on this application as well. Is there any further comments or questions in the region?
I do have some questions, Mr. Chair.
Please.
For the applicant, My understanding is that this is going to be a standalone office. It's not going to be accessory to or in any way related to any of the other uses going on in the building?
Correct.
And what are some of the uses that surround the site?
Surround the site, there is, in the same building, there's a Huron Fasteners, there's a...
Sorry, to be clear, I'm asking about the properties adjacent, not within the building. The staff report is clear on what else is going on in the building. I'm just curious as to what the nature of the uses in the surrounding properties are.
I haven't really inventoried the surrounding businesses. They all seem to be both industrial and commercial in use.
They're compatible with the proposed use,
Yes.
is what I'm getting at.
Yes.
Thank you.
Anything further?
Mr. Sheriff, to address this concern about whether or not a building permit is being issued, perhaps the condition can be revised to state something along the lines of a building permit obtained for change of use if necessary under the Building Code Act.
How about order the satisfaction of the building department? That's generally how we...
Except that it's not, the Building Code Act isn't discretionary. So that would be my only concern.
I think that if we leave it up to the building department to clear the condition, that at that point in time, they would have the opportunity to review it and discuss it through planning staff. That would allow them to meet any criteria that they would need.
Staff would be in agreement with that. I didn't quite understand Ms. Meter's requirement. If she could expand further.
Happy to, through you, Mr. Chair. The condition as it currently reads states that a building permit, the condition is that a building permit is obtained for a change of use. Well, when you read that on its own, you must obtain a building permit. If one cannot be required under the Building Code Act, because this doesn't constitute a change of use as it is defined under the Building Code Act, then you can't clear this condition. So if you rewrite it so it says that a building permit is obtained for a change of use if necessary under the Building Code Act, it's still completely clearable, and it's still a matter of interpretation as to whether or not it's required under the Building Code Act.
Question for the applicant. Will the change of use that is going to be happening inside the building require a building permit for electrical, plumbing, or anything like that?
No, we're adopting the office as is.
Okay, then I would like to have some wording in there that he can clear it through the building department without having, I agree that the language is strong and it will be difficult to clear. So if we can alter the language of the first one to ensure that it's to the satisfaction of the building department so that it'll be a simple letter for you to sign off on if there is nothing to be changed on the property and it still protects the city for any type of building code.
I prefer my wording. if it's going to, if everyone's going to be clear that to the satisfaction of the building department is in their interpretation of the Building Code Act, then I think I can live with that language.
Diana, did you get that? Yes, please.
I have that a building permit for the change of use, if required under the Building Code Act, to the satisfaction of the building division.
Yeah, that sounds great. That works for me. Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you.
Perfect. Okay, so everybody's happy with this?
Mr. Chair, I'll make a motion to approve application at A 2018-71, subject to the conditions set out in the staff report and the required fees, with condition 1 being amended.
I'll second that.
All in favor? Great, thank you.
Thank you.
I just want to confirm, you are adding the condition regarding the GRCA for the permit. Normally, they clear this on their own as the applicant. It's indicated at the bottom that the applicant has been invoiced. So I just want to know if you want it as a condition regarding the decision or not. I can indicate that the owner shall provide satisfaction financial arrangements for the GRCA regarding their permit fee, is how the condition would be worded if you wish. I just need to confirm.
Yes. Great, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
All right, application 2018-072, 47 Water Street North. In support or opposition?
I'm Christian Snyder. I'm the owner of the property.
Good morning. Have you had an opportunity to read the staff report? They're making recommendation to approve subject to conditions.
Yep.
Do you have any questions with regards to any of these conditions of their approval?
No.
Pretty straightforward application, building permit. Any questions or comments?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I notice in the staff report that the environmental planning comments are that an arborist should be consulted to determine if pruning of branches would be necessary. But the vegetation they're referring to, an existing tree, is on adjacent property. I'm not sure that we can put in a condition requiring an adjacent property owner to comply with this, and I see our staff is shaking their head no. So that was just a question, Mr. Chair. Other than that, I'm good on this particular application.
May I speak to that?
Yep, please.
I'm not sure that that tree is actually on an adjacent property. I believe it's actually on our property. And we have consulted an arborist, and it will probably need some pruning, but I believe it is on our property from what I can tell. If you look at the photo, the tree that they're talking about is the one on the left-hand side there. And as far as I know, I mean, it's inside our fence. So.
Through you, Mr. Chair, with the confirmation from the applicant that they have already consulted an arborist, I think that's a moot point. So I'm prepared to move that this be approved with the two conditions that are in the staff report.
Second?
I'll second that.
All in favor? Great, thank you. All right, application number 2018-073, 42 Crosswinds Drive.
Diana, what about Water Street?
Morning.
Oh, that was, okay.
Good morning.
My name is Phil Hom with Fusion Homes.
Thank you. Have you had an opportunity to read the applications? Do you have any
Yes.
questions or concerns about it?
Nope.
They're making recommendation with one condition, that you get a building permit. Is there any questions or comments on this?
No questions or comments, sir. Staff satisfied. It's a straightforward application. I'm happy to make a motion.
I'll second that, Mr. Chair.
All in favor? Done. Hold on. All right, application number 2018-074, 390 River Trail Avenue. It's a very similar application. You've had an opportunity to read the staff report.
Yes.
Through you, Mr. Chair, this is a very simple application, same as the previous one. The one condition from the building department would be a building permit, and so I move that this be approved as per the staff report.
Second that?
All in favor? Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, application 2018-075, 70 Dumart Place. In support or opposition?
Morning. Roland Drasdo, 70 Dumart, owner.
Good morning.
Support.
It's a very simple application. You were just here a couple months ago.
That's right.
And a little bit of cleanup obviously needs to happen here. Is there any questions or comments with regards to this application?
Yes, Mr. Chair. I do have a couple of comments. This did come to the committee, I believe, last month. Now, this is an existing shed that is, in old terms, 93 square feet, which is under the requirement of the building code for a building permit. It appears to me to be quite a sturdy shed, and they are planning to use this for storage of landscaping equipment, which I think is a perfect use. I do have one question, through you, Mr. Chair, to the applicant. I notice in the picture on the second page that there's a floodlight or some type of illumination above the garage door. Am I correct, through you, Mr. Chair, to the applicant?
Yes, it's not a functioning light, though.
It's a non-functioning light?
It's sort of a deterrent for theft. There's no electricity to the shed.
Okay, that kind of satisfies my concern that if there was an additional service to to this nice-looking little shed, that it would need to be approved by an electrical inspector.
No.
But seeing the applicant is saying it's just cosmetic, the next thing I would like to actually more just remind the applicant, this is adjacent to residential property, and I believe under the city's official plan, wherever commercial or industrial abuts, in this case, undeveloped residential land, that when this does move ahead to for construction on the adjacent property, the applicant will be required to put in an 8-foot solid fence of some description at that time. And so that's just a reminder to the applicant. I don't think we need to make it make it a condition, because I'm sure our staff will pick up on that when the adjacent properties are developed.
Actually, just to clarify, I do believe this is a commercial location, and you're located with your neighboring resident, or the people who surround your property are commercial and industrial, light industrial uses?
It's a commercial park, yes.
Yeah. It's commercial.
It's commercial left and right, but the property behind is designated as residential.
Well, once that property is designated or developed, they will have to deal with abutting any type of noise or fences from them. It's a moot point. It doesn't make any difference.
I agree, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to make the applicant aware that at some point there will be a need for a solid fence along the rear yard of the property.
Terrific. Thank you. Can I get a motion?
I have just a request for an amendment to the conditions, or an additional condition. I appreciate that this will go through site plan, but there is an acknowledgement in the staff report that buffering is going to be required in terms of setbacks, landscaping, screening, berming, something along those lines. And I, again, appreciate that will be addressed through site plan approval. However, my vote in favor of this application would be dependent upon that occurring. So I would like to attach a condition to this approval requiring a landscape plan be prepared and implemented to the satisfaction of the appropriate member of staff. Not through site plan, as a condition of this approval.
If we go back to the other application that was before us last month, I don't recall what the conditions of approval of there. Was there anything tied to it as far as site plan control?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I don't recall what the application was last month. I see 20 or 30 of these a month, so I apologize. I do not know the details, but perhaps the applicant can shed some light on that.
Do you recall what the conditions of approval were for the applicant last time? I'm just curious. What I'm trying to do is find out if there was a site plan approval or a landscape plan in place, because then by tacking this on, it's just a one-line sentence that'll get rolled over to the other thing, and then kind of everybody's protected and happy, I guess.
One of the conditions of the last application I made was to remove and destroy the shed, and the other one was to remove ocean line containers that were too close to the property line as well. So those are the two conditions of the last application. I do have a question about the fence as well. So right now it's agricultural behind me. If it became residential at some point, would they be responsible for putting up a fence?
Through you, Mr. Chair,
And their site plan?
I'd like to address that question. Yeah, actually, yes, it would be the responsibility of the developer at the time when the lands are developed to put up fences. Typically, the developers do put up fences between residential uses and commercial uses. The only time at which what would trigger something like that on this property would be at the time of a site plan approval. I'm not sure whether the applicant is seeking any further site plan approval at this time. So, just for clarification.
Thank you.
There is a current site plan application, stamp B. I have an application in right now.
So with being a current stamp plan B application, he's going to have to submit landscaping plans to the satisfaction.
There is a landscaping
Yeah.
plan, but I'm just questioning the fence, the solid wood fence, because there is currently a fence there now, a chain link fence that was approved from the original site plan approval, right, when it was built. So my question is about the solid fence, since there is already chain link fence there.
That would actually fall under the site plan control for stamp plan B. They would make that recommendation, and, you know, and that would be tied down to your previous application. So I think what we need to do is we really need to keep the scope of what this application is in front of us, and it's dealing with maintaining that existing building. And, you know, that's what we need to focus on. I think we're getting away from what the actual application is here.
Mr. Chair, I assume you're referring to my proposed condition for a landscape plan? And I'll just clarify, because this shed, the whole point of the landscape plan is to buffer and hide the shed. So if I am going to support the application, I need to know that that landscaping is going to occur through this, as part of this process. If it's a redundant condition, if it's duplicative, that's fine, but I don't have any control over site plan, and that would be the basis for me supporting this application is that it's properly screened.
Okay, great, thank you. Julie?
Through Mr. Chair, staff has no objection to requiring landscaping. It just may, as Ms. Meter mentioned, it may already be covered through site plan, but I mean, if the condition's there, it will be cleared, either through the site plan process or through as part of this process.
I just pulled up the decision from the previous meeting, and condition 3 on the previous decision that the owner shall receive approval for a landscape plan from an urban designer in conjunction with the stamp plan B application. So it was imposed at the June 19th meeting for the previous variance. So I can roll the condition forward exactly as it was in the previous decision if that's satisfaction to the committee.
I think that would cover everything and everybody happy. It's no additional work for the applicant. It's just a quick little sign off. And would that satisfy the committee?
Yes, Mr. Chair, subject to any further comments, I'm happy to make a motion.
Just for clarification to our clerk, are we going to include that wording from the previous application in June to cover this application?
It's up to the committee. I'm just letting you know that I just reviewed the decision from the previous meeting and indicated that condition 3 was worded exactly that way, so it can roll forward into this decision and it would be exactly the same. So it's up to you, what you wish.
I think the wording of the previous application, if it applies to this one as well, I'm fine with that. So if that was your motion, that it includes that, I will second that motion.
That was my motion, Mr. Chair.
Second? All in favor? Great. Thank you. Thank you. All right, application 2018-076, 295 Lancaster Street West. In support or opposition?
Good morning. Micah Sadler.
Good morning. Have you had an opportunity to read the staff report?
I have.
Do you have any questions or comments or making recommendations to approve subject to conditions?
No, sir.
Does the committee members have anything to add, offer a comment?
I have some questions. I think this is a great application, and I don't want to hinder it in any way, but I just want to confirm that the proposed deck, what its elevation is relative to grade. I'm also curious as to whether a building permit is required for the deck and whether or not there's any accessibility requirements for it.
Great questions. So all of those, first and foremost, the only reason that we're doing a grade level deck is due to the slope at the front of the property. The level of, or the height of the deck itself will be as high as a 2x4. Only as high as a 2x4, only to take out the grade that's already there. As far as the building permit itself, it's already underway. We have already applied and had acceptance. The only thing that came up was zoning. So that is already underway. And yes, due to the height of the deck, there will only be actual slope for accessibility. There will be no stair.
Because I see the plan shows a stair,
Yeah.
2 risers.
Yeah,
Okay.
sorry, it does show a stair. That will be amended just to be a ramp. There will be no stair.
Thank you.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Anything further? Recommendation? Motion?
Mr. Chair, I move that this be approved with the 2 conditions as in the staff report, and thanks to the applicant for acknowledging that it should be accessible. I don't think we need to make that a condition, but so I move that this be approved with the 2 conditions.
Second that.
All in favor?
Thank you.
Noted. Thank you. All right, application 2018-077, 388 King Street. In support or opposition?
Morning, Mr. Chair. My name is Pierre Chauvin with MHBC Planning. Here in support of the application, just want to take a moment to thank staff for all their assistance in this application. We support the recommendation, and that's before you. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Is there any questions or comments from the committee?
Through you, Mr. Chair, just an interesting comment and maybe a question, and I don't want to delay this application or the meeting. Are there any other stackable parking lots within the city?
Through you, Mr. Chair, not to our knowledge, no. We would definitely like to see one operational. So, yes.
Through you, Mr. Chair, to staff, I don't recall ever seeing one myself, and I'm very interested to see how this is going to work out. Innovative way to meet with changing times. So, Mr. Chair, and seeing there's nobody objecting to this, I move, just to notice that there are no region or GRCA fees, I move that this be approved with the 4 conditions in the staff report.
Thanks, Mr. McCall. I think we're going to let Jennifer have a turn here first.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My questions all revolve around, well, I would note that it appears there was a traffic study done to support this. We didn't have that before us, and yet we're being asked to approve a number of parking variances. I would have liked to see that traffic study to assure myself that the variances are appropriate. We have staff's recommendation, but if a traffic study has been done, I think that should be before the committee as well, who are making that decision. But my questions relate mainly to the proposed balconies. I don't see a site plan in the package that would show me the relationship of those balconies to the adjacent properties. Is there one available?
To you, Mr. Chair, I have extra copies of the site plan I can distribute if you like.
I would like to see those, Mr. Chair, if that's possible.
Please.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to correct the record. We do have the parking justification report. My apologies.
So if I can explain what you have, in front of you is the site plan, which is still before city staff, and we're waiting final approval in principle. There's a number of floor plans, and then the last couple pages will be the elevations, the rendered elevations. But on the site plan, you'll note at the very top by the barrier-free, I would call it to the left or to the west the portion of the site. We've identified the balconies, which is where we are requesting the variance. So those are the only, there are balconies on either side of the drive aisle, but the balcony on the left or westerly side is supported by the pillars, and that's what we were requesting. That is the area we're requesting a variance.
I apologize for being so obtuse. I'm not seeing where it is on the site plan. I don't know if there's a means to show me. I would like to understand that, but first, in conjunction with that, I just had one question, because I know in the staff report that non-supported balconies can project closer than what's being proposed here. What is the basis for that in the zoning bylaw to allow non-supported, why is there a distinction between supported and unsupported balconies, and whereas the former can project further closer to the property line than the latter? I can't figure out the rationale for that.
Through Mr. Chair, I don't know that I have an answer for Ms. Meter today. It's in the zoning bylaw. It has been, probably hasn't been challenged since the zoning bylaw's existence since 1985. Albeit it's a good question. I just don't have an answer for you today, Ms. Meter.
Okay, thank you. Do we know the general intent and purpose of this regulation?
It's through you, Mr. Chair. My estimation, or my opinion, it's really more about sort of the massing of that, the feel of the balcony by having something supported and versus unsupported. In my view, these are basically poles. So really, it doesn't really contribute to the mass and feel of those balconies projecting into the rear yard. So that's why I've supported it, and I believe why staff has supported it as well. I don't know if the projector works here. I could always, on the table, bring the screen up. But I'll leave that to staff.
Mr. Chair, while we're waiting, maybe I can add a bit of clarification from my viewpoint on this. I think it's more or less an issue of aesthetics. My understanding of a balcony supported not only by the building but by some other structure on the front end would be stronger than a cantilever hanging out balcony. I'm quite sure that engineers have made those cantilever balconies very, very safe. Currently going through a project with another organization where the issue of balconies came to the discussion at our planning committee. I think, again, in this particular case, going back to either the 94 bylaw or even earlier, it may have been just an issue of styling and aesthetics at that point. So I don't see this as being an issue of any kind.
Thank you.
Thank you for indulging me in my questions. Mr. Chair, I'm happy to make a recommendation if that's where this committee's headed. Motion. Okay.
Mr. Chair, I'll second that.
Motion to approve the application as subject to the 4 conditions set out in the staff report.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, application number 2018-078, 120, 130, 140 King Street. In support or opposition, please.
Oh, sorry. Kevin Muir with GSB Group. We're representing Andern Next Limited, the owner of the property. We're in support of the recommendation. This is the what is known as the second phase of the City Centre project, being marketed as the Young Condos. We also have plans. If it certainly helps the committee, some of the variances are rather technical in details, and it sometimes helps to see a plan of it. And we're certainly here to answer any questions that the committee may have.
Thank you.
My name is Brian Kelly. I'm counsel for Tony DiBattista and for 536357, of which Tony DiBattista is the sole shareholder, officer, and director, in opposition to the application this morning.
Great, thank you very much. Just as we muddle through this just for a moment or two, they're making a recommendation to approve, subject on several conditions. I would like to hear if the committee has any current questions. Actually, we're going to turn this over to Julianne for a minute.
Yes, I'm wondering if we could have about a 5-minute recess. I need to consult with somebody about this information that was just received.
Would it be satisfactory if we moved on to another application and came back?
We'd still have to consult to get back to this, but
would that give you an opportunity for us to continue moving forward, or? All right, we're going to take a short recess. We're going to be back in 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Nice to meet you.
Kevin? And where did Brian go? There he is. Okay, what staff is, we took a quick little recess just to discuss how to do this. We had some new information that's just been brought to us literally moments ago. I think at this time we're waiting for our legal department to have representation down here to hear this. Just I think at this point in time we need their support and their knowledge base to further address this. So they're not available at the moment. What I'd like to do is I'd like to throw you guys to the back of the pile, right? You guys take a little seat, provide some time, and hopefully we can get them down here, and then we can address this correctly and safely today. Is that okay with everybody? Okay. All right.
Yes, sir.
We'll pick this up as soon as we have them present here, okay? All right. Thank you. So we're going to move on to application 2018-079 to 094. That's Ridgemount Street and Sportsman's Hall. If anybody's in support or opposition, if they could please come forward.
Hello, my name is Kate Wills. I'm a planner with MHBC, and I'm here representing Activa Holdings on all those applications that you just noted there for Sportsman Hill Street and Ridgemount Street.
Great, thank you. Have you had an opportunity to read the staff report and the recommendations and conditions for approval?
I have, yes, and we are in agreement with staff's comments. And we'd also like to thank staff for working with us through this process.
Great, thank you. From the committee, is there any questions or comments about all of these applications?
Yes, Mr. Chair, I do have some comments and questions. This is an application to reduce the side yard setback to 0.94 meters, if I got the number right. And it's in relation to a covered porch only. So I would like to ensure that that 0.94 meters doesn't become the side facade of the entire building. So I'm wondering if we can impose a condition, either, I don't know if there's drawings that can apply for every one of those sites, but just to tie it to that setback being applicable only to the covered porch.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I'm okay with that.
Thank you. If I could draw your attention to the drawings in the pile, you'll see where did you look at the porches? And then you can note on the previous site plan here, you can see where it is, and you can see the dynamics. Would you be okay if we tied it to these drawings? You know, these are pretty formal site plan drawings.
Through you, Mr. Chair, yes, we are.
We'll add to the satisfaction of the Director of Planning or something like that, just to ensure that if there is a minor change, that way you don't have to come back through the process, okay? That'll
Okay.
clean things up nicely.
And I'm not, I think it might be overly onerous to tie them to the drawings outright, but maybe if we could subject, that the variance be subject to the drawings insofar as it relates to that side yard.
Okay, if everybody's in agreement.
Just for clarification, Mr. Chair, we're just referring to the two end units where the porches are, because there are no side yard setbacks on the other ones.
The variances only relate to those lots, I believe.
Yeah, yep.
The side yards for the end units.
Mr. Chair, maybe I'm still a little confused. Are we making a suggestion that there's an extra condition added for the porches only?
Yes, and actually, sir, through you, Mr. Chair, perhaps it would be sufficient to tie it to the site plans, to the extent, so that way it's only the setback. You don't have to be, you wouldn't be tied to the design of the building on those, but just to make sure that the setback relates to the side porch and you wouldn't be pushing the wall out to that side yard.
Mr. Chair, I agree with our colleague on that. I think it's important that it be clearly stated that it's just the porches that are involved and not the whole building.
Do you have any verbiage you'd like to add to that?
I'm thinking about it, sir.
I know, so am I.
That the variances occur, that the development occurs substantially in accordance with the site plan drawings by MHBC dated July 13th, 2018, to the extent of the side facades of the end units.
Yeah, oh, sorry. Julianne?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I was just trying to confirm whether the application has already gone through site plan approval, and I believe the applicant has confirmed that.
Through you, Mr. Chair, the applications have all gone through stamp plan. We have verbal approval from staff, and it's just pending decision of the Committee of Adjustment on these two variances.
So why don't we make it,
So just to make it substantially in accordance with the plans.
yeah, or just as for site plan approval?
I'm okay with the wording that Ms. Meter has, so long as they're consistent with each other, like that this is consistent with what was on the site plan. So that's all I was trying to confirm. Yeah.
Well, I'm fine with that, too. Deanna, would you read that back to us?
That approval of the subject application be subject to the plans prepared by MHBC Planning to the extent of the side yard setback for the N units.
Be substantially in accordance with.
Do we have a motion?
Motion to approve application A 2018-79 through 94, subject to 2 conditions, one set out in the staff report and one added on the floor.
I'll second that, Mr. Chair.
All in favor? Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, application number 2018-048 and 2018-049. In support or opposition, please.
Good morning.
Good morning. I trust you've had an opportunity to read the staff report. They're making a recommendation to approve subject to conditions.
Yes, we've had a chance to review the staff report, and we're here in full support of the 15 conditions that are being requested by staff and the region.
Great, thank you. Is there any questions or comments from the committee?
Just one question. I see there's a road taking as part of the conditions. And I just wanted to confirm or just understand if the severance sketch accounts for that.
Through you, Mr. Chair, the measurements and everything that we've asked for in the lot areas and that are in accordance with the taking of the daylight triangle by the region. Yes.
Thank you.
I'd also like to note that there are regional conditions that are tied to this application. Any further questions or comments?
Mr. Chair, through you, I see that the region's fees are indicated on condition number 10. I would move that this be approved as per the 15 conditions, as indicated in the staff report.
Second?
Sorry, just to clarify, the region's conditions are incorporated in 10 through 15.
Correct.
Okay. I'll second the motion.
All in favor? Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, application number B 2018-055, 33 Second Ave. Anybody in support or opposition?
Hello, my name is Jody Jennings. I'm representing the applicants and for a request that committee consider their application complete.
Thank you. If you could just bring the microphone a little bit closer.
Sorry.
Terrific, thank you. Have you had an opportunity to read the staff report?
We have.
They're making a recommendation to approve subject to certain conditions. Do you have any questions or comments?
No.
From the committee, does anybody have any questions or comments? There is regional conditions in here as well.
Mr. Chair, maybe we should vocalize those region conditions, particularly the noise condition.
Sure. Just for your knowledge, I won't support a motion that includes condition number 4 for the reasons I previously stated at this committee.
Noted, thank you. All right, the second Ave conditions for the regional is that the units fitted with forced air and heating, and a noise warning clause, as stated in the staff report, accompanies the deed. And that it just acknowledged that there is noise associated with the location. Mr. McCall, you've heard from Ms. Meter. Would you like to make a... Oh, sorry, Julianne?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I just want a couple points of clarification, if possible, just for the committee's benefit. Firstly, I just wanted to... I didn't catch the lady's name and what her relationship is to the application, because I don't see her name on the application, so I was just curious. about her representing the applicant. And the other question I have is, or the other statement I wanted to make is that this application came to the committee about a year ago, and the consent has lapsed with all of these conditions in place. So I just wanted to mention that to committee, that it had already come to committee. The applicant was unable to fulfill all the conditions within the year time frame, and it has now come back to you. So.
Great, thank you. So once again, if you could just state your relationship to the applicant and why you're here, or...
My name is Jody Jennings. I work as an administrator for the applicants as property manager.
She's not listed on here.
Great, thank you.
Mr. Chair, through you, maybe Ms. Meter would... I would actually ask Ms. Meter if she could clarify her concerns over condition number 4. Again, maybe as this project has lapsed, maybe my memory has lapsed.
I don't know if I was on the committee, if I was on the panel that approved this originally. Nonetheless, I have a concern with any condition that would impose site plan on a residential development when it's beyond the site plan control bylaw, particularly if it's in relation to, as it's worded in this condition, compatibility with the neighborhood in terms of massing, scale, and design, and that the drawings be approved prior to issuance of a building permit, because site plan doesn't regulate those things. The zoning bylaw does, and if there's no variances associated with it, it's inappropriate. We would judge those things through this committee and through the as-of-right zoning permission, so those are the reasons I continue to state that I don't support that condition.
In all fairness, maybe Julianne, you'd like to just speak really quickly back to that? On what
in all fairness, I believe Ms. Meter and I have disagreed on this term on a number of occasions. However, I think it is a reasonable request. It was something that the applicant agreed to. We've heard here from the applicant's administrative person who's representing the applicant here that they are in agreement with all the conditions. So I certainly would encourage you to consider this. It's in the Rianne study area, just within, I think it was just at the last council meeting, some of the regulations that are intended to implement Rianne's were adopted by council. So we're moving forward in terms of having more of these sites with respect to site plan, not necessarily a Section 41 agreement, and I know Ms. Meter and I have exchanged dialogue about that. I'm not trying to make a big case of it, but other than, it's a means of ensuring that the development is compatible with what's in the area. That's staff's intent.
Thank you.
Through you, Mr. Chair, thanks, Julianne, for clarifying that. But just so I'm completely up to speed on this, this is not going through the full official site plan. This is just an opportunity for staff to verify that the scale and massing of the development will be compatible with the existing neighborhood. We don't have the elevation drawings in front of us, so we can't make that decision. But this isn't under a Section 41 site plan. This is just a final approval from the Director of Planning or at the city to make sure that it's compatible with the existing neighborhood.
May I? If staff were to find that the proposed dwelling was not compatible in massing and scale, what would the recourse be? Would it be requiring them to have a setback or a building height or something less than what they're permitted to as of right? I'm just not sure what is achieved through this condition, given the rights of the development rights that are afforded to the property.
Again, through you, Mr. Chair, I would respectfully request that you consider this because the applicant has agreed to it.
Do we have a motion?
Interesting differences of opinion here, and then that's one of the good things about this committee is that we all get to bring forward our concerns. I understand Ms. Meter's interpretation as her profession, which is really nice to have on this committee. But I'm actually going to side with staff on this. The applicant has agreed to this condition. We would be in for more dialogue if the applicant was contesting that condition, and my decision might be different, but the applicant's agreed. So, Mr. Chair, I move that this be approved with this 13 conditions as well as the region's additional noise, standard noise condition.
Do I have a second? I will second it. All in favor?
Thank you.
Great, thank you. Right. All right, application number B 2018-056, that's 63 Plymouth Road. If anybody's in support or opposition.
Good morning. My name is Boyan Bielic. I'm the owner of 63 Plymouth Road.
Thank you. Have you had an opportunity to read the staff report? They're making a recommendation to approve subject to certain conditions.
Yes, I have.
Do you have any questions or comments with regards to these comments or conditions?
No, I do not.
We do have a submission letter in opposition. Have you had an opportunity to read that?
Yeah, I just received it late last minute here, and I have read through it, correct.
Through you, Mr. Chair, it would be helpful to have staff here to answer these questions, but the building is constructed, correct?
Correct.
And it's a permitted use?
Yes.
And there was no, it wasn't subject to any variances, it's not subject to any variances here. It's simply splitting the property along the now existing party wall. I'm not sure that any of the concerns raised in this letter of opposition can be addressed. They all relate to the structure that's built and as of right.
I agree with you. It's unfortunate that this is how sometimes things fit and how things happen, but it is development, and you can't make everybody happy all the time. Do you have any questions or comments?
Mr. Chair, I echo both the concerns that you two have raised. It's unfortunate that this is the way the process proceeds. I agree with Ms. Meter that they have has right to go ahead with this. It's just a problem of communicating with the neighborhood, and I agree with you, Mr. Chair, you can't keep all the people happy all the time. So it's unfortunate, but I don't think this committee has really much leeway to address the concerns of those that are objecting, because it's already built.
It's not just it's already built, it's legal. They're only asking to sever the lot. There's no variances here or anything like that. It's just it's a severance application.
Mr. Chair, based upon the discussions we've had, I move that this application be approved with the 9 conditions that are in the staff report. Yeah, that's my motion, Mr.
I'd like
Chair.
to note that there's also regional conditions as well. Generally, usual fee, you'll see them in the staff report. So,
yeah, they're already indicated in the conditions.
And then The region also speaks to a noise warning clause that will be added to your deed, as well as a fee.
Yeah, I understand the fee.
Okay. All right, second?
I'll second the motion.
All in favor? Great, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, application 2018-057, 103 Plymouth.
Good morning. My name is Vukovic, and I'm the owner of 103 Plymouth.
Good morning. Have you had an opportunity to read the staff report? They're making recommendation to approve subject to certain conditions.
Yes.
Do you have any questions or comments with regards to these conditions?
No.
Of the staff report?
No.
Very similar application to the last one. Is there any questions or comments from the committee?
Mr. Chair, motion to approve application, I'll make a motion to approve application DSD, no, sorry, B 2018-157, subject to the city's conditions and the region's conditions as set out in the staff report.
Just a quick note, the regional condition is for a noise warning clause to be added to the deed, et cetera, et cetera. Okay,
Yes.
just make sure you read it, it's in the staff report.
Yep.
Second?
I'll second that, Mr. Chair.
All in favor? Great.
Thank you.
All right, application 2018-058, it's 399 Queen Street. In support or opposition?
Hi, Amanda Stellings of Polo Corping.
Maybe you want to walk us through this application and what they're asking for. It's just a little bit on the complicated side, just to ensure that we get the things set out in the right tone. And I trust you have read the application, or the staff report.
Yes, I read it. So, Mr. Chair, for a bit of a background, we had gone through a consent application to allow for an underground parking structure behind 389 Queen Street. Since that consent application, our civil engineer had advised us that a catch basin was required on the surface, and the easement that had been registered and associated with the previous consent application did not include the wording for a catch basin.
Do you have any questions or comments?
Mr. Chair, through you, the applicant is alluding to the underground easement, which was approved by this committee fairly recently. A fairly unusual situation, Mr. Chair. With your experience in the development industry, have you ever come across an underground easement? That notwithstanding, it was approved by the committee, and this is just adding a little extra addendum to deal with stormwater management.
Yeah, sorry, if I can clarify. The easement's on the surface. So the severance was for underground. The easement on the surface is the catch basin in favor of 399 Queen Street.
I stand corrected. Yes, that was the severance was for the underground. I think this is pretty straightforward, Mr. Chair. I will move that this be approved with the 3 conditions.
I'll second the motion.
All in favor?
Thank you.
Great. Thank you. All right, application B 2018-059, B 2018-060, 640, 645 Trillium Drive, and McBride Place. In support or opposition?
Hello.
All right, Scott, I trust you had an opportunity to read the staff report, and they're making recommendation to approve subject to certain conditions.
Yes, we have, and we're here in full support of the recommendations and the conditions as suggested.
Thank you. Does the committee have any questions or comments?
Through you, Mr. Chair, if I understand it correctly, these are just lots that merged on title, and you're wanting to take it back to where they were. And there's region fees, GRCA fees. You're well aware of that, I'm sure. So I have no problems with this application. Mr. Chair, then I move that this be approved as per the 3 conditions plus the region and GRCA fees.
Mr. Chair, I'll second the motion.
All in favor? Great, thank you. All right, application number B2018-061 and 859 Cortlandt Ave. In support or opposition?
Good morning, Mr. Chair, committee members. My name is Heather Price with GSP Group, agent on behalf of the owner of 859 Cortlandt Avenue East.
Thank you. I trust you've had an opportunity to read the staff report and the recommendation to approve subject to these conditions?
Yes, we have, Mr. Chair, and we're in full support of the conditions that are imposed, or to be imposed.
Thank you. Is there any questions or comments? I'd like to note that there is regional conditions. Which is to obtain an access permit and a permit to work on the regional right-of-way. Any questions or comments?
I'll make a motion, Mr. Chair, that these applications 2018-61 be approved, subject to the conditions set out in the staff report, including the region and conditions in the GRCA fee.
I'll second that.
All in favor? Great. Thank you. All right, application 2018-062, 560 and 632 Victoria Street North. In support or opposition?
Morning, Mr. Chair. It's Kate Fairbrother, solicitors for the applicant, Weston Foods.
Thank you. Have you had an opportunity to read the staff report to make a recommendation to approve subject to some conditions?
I did, yes, and the committee will note that I submitted a letter yesterday regarding concerns about one of the conditions that was being proposed by staff. The concern is condition number 4, the requirement for site plan approval, and the concern primarily was with the scope of this condition being a requirement for site plan approval. This site essentially functions as two individual sites already, and the proposal is to sever it into two to basically reflect the conditions that exist. No development is actually proposed at this time, and so from our perspective, this isn't a situation that would normally trigger a fresh site plan application. There is already a site plan that's applicable to the site and development agreements that have been updated several times over the years as our client has made changes to the site. But again, no changes proposed at this time to the site other than a new lot line. And we didn't have an opportunity, unfortunately, to speak to staff about this until this morning, and hence the submission of the letter. But I did have an opportunity to speak to staff and understand a little bit more about the scope of what staff is looking for in terms of this condition. And I understand that staff simply wants an updated site plan that reflects the existing conditions on the site and shows the new lot line that is proposed. And on that basis, we do not have an objection to submitting an updated site plan that reflects that.
Is there any questions or comments?
Through you, Mr. Chair. Can you tell me you said that there's no development proposed on the site, whereas the staff report does indicate that the purpose of the severance is to allow for the future development of the severed lands.
Eventually, that's expected to occur. Our client intends to convey the property to a purchaser who will likely continue to use the property for some commercial purpose. I can't exactly say what that use will be. But for the time being and for the purposes of this application, there's no development that's being proposed. The site will be conveyed at a certain time, and whoever buys the property, if they want to make changes or whatever the case may be, they'll have to submit a separate application at that time.
Is the concrete block building on the severed lands currently in use?
Yes, it is currently used as an outlet store for the bakery, as a bakery outlet store, but it is proposed to be closed and conveyed.
So there is ultimately going to be development, and this isn't a site plan, clearly, but the applicant is here before us with an application that constitutes development. So it's a severance. A severance is a development. Before you get to site plan, it's a severance application. However, to address the concerns, because we can impose reasonable conditions, we could simply, instead of having the condition worded as it is for site plan, if the purpose is to relot the parking lot, we can just impose that directly as a condition of this approval. Those are my comments.
Thank you. Julian?
Yes, through you, Mr. Chair. Firstly, I'd just like to mention there is a site plan currently on the subject lands, as I believe the lady, although I didn't catch her name, sorry, mentioned. However, the site plan is between the agreement is between the city and the property owner, and one of the terms is that if there are minor adjustments to the site, and an amendment to the agreement will be required. So I have a copy of the agreement here, and it's the most recent agreement that is here. So I believe that we aren't seeking anything that is onerous. We're not suggesting that it will be the extent of a typical Section 41 agreement type of site planned arrangement. It might be just to indicate with respect to the new property lines, where is all the parking? Does the parking satisfy now the requirements for each lot in terms of the zoning bylaw? So those are the types of things that we're trying to establish through the site plan. I believe Ms. Meter is correct in indicating that a consent is development. Under the provincial policy statement, consent is considered development, and therefore staff feel that it's appropriate to have this condition. The details of the site plan and how involved it would likely be what we call a stamp plan B, which is not as onerous a process. It's likely just to represent what is on the ground today and so that each site can operate and function independently of each other, and to ensure that there is compliance with respect to zoning. In speaking to my colleague Farinack earlier, there was also an indication of we want to assure that the access points are located in the correct areas, and that the parking is sufficient to accommodate both parcels.
Great, thank you. I'd also like some clarification on why a record of site was not asked for this property.
I'm sorry, I didn't understand your question.
Why a record of site condition wasn't applied to this property? Has there been one completed on the site? If we're severing it and we're creating two parcels, is this not normal that we ask for a record of site condition?
A record of site condition is usually requested for a change in use for a more sensitive land use. I don't know that one would be typically asked here in this place, and it's often in this situation would be asked for at time of just before building permit. So the building division would be asking for something if there was something required. Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
Through you, Mr. Chair, to the applicant, just for clarification, your only concern with the staff's recommendation is condition number 4?
It was condition number 4, yes, and I took the position in my letter and still continue to take the position, although I think we resolved the issue ultimately that for the purposes of Section 41, a consent is not development as defined in that section. But regardless, our client is prepared to submit an updated site plan for staff to review based on what exists on the site now. And if the severed parcel is intended to be redeveloped, then that will be subject to a separate site plan process.
So if I understand it correctly, you're not happy with condition number 4, but you'll go along with it?
I think it's a little overkill, considering what's already in place on the site and the fact that there's no, for the purpose of Section 41, there is no development being proposed. There's no change to the site. There's no, it's literally the site as it exists now with a new lot line down the middle, to recognize essentially the fact that it already operates almost as independently as two sites. And from my perspective, for the purpose of Section 41, that's not development and would not trigger a full site plan application. Notwithstanding, we recognize staff's interest in receiving an updated site plan. There is a site plan already on site. Our client has always complied with that requirement in the past. Our client has always received variances as necessary or appropriate for what they did with the site over the years, and we'll do that again in this case.
Mr. Chair, and maybe this is not appropriate at this time, maybe down the road a little bit, staff can clarify whether under Section 41 a severance is considered development. We seem to be at a difference of opinion here. That notwithstanding, the applicant has pretty much agreed reluctantly to provide staff with the necessary information concerning the site. So, Mr. Chair, I move that this be approved with the 5 conditions that are in the staff report.
Thank you. I'd also like to note that there's regional conditions on here dealing with the transit bus shelter, grading and drainage, as well as the environmental noise and work permits. So if we can revise that recommendation to as staff report, or to include the regional conditions, please.
And just to clarify my position on this, it's not, for me, it's not whether or not this application is defined as development under the site plan provisions of the Planning Act. It's whether this is development under the Planning Act, which we know it is, a severance application on its own, and that we have the right to impose conditions as part of this application, notwithstanding what Section 41 says. So that's where I'm coming from in terms of it being development, and it's appropriate for the city, if they require a parking layout plan and the like as part of this approval, I'm supportive of that.
Mr. Chair, thanks for the clarification. And actually, if it wasn't development, we wouldn't be able to take the cash in lieu of parkland dedication. So I understand and concur.
And again, if I might just add, the reason for the concern was a question about the scope of exactly what staff was going to be asking for in the situation, and I think we've clarified that with staff, and on the basis of the condition, which is seeking a site plan that acknowledges the existing layout of the severed end of the site and what will be the severed and retained parcels, we don't object to that condition.
Bob's made a motion, please.
I'll second the motion.
All right, all in favor? Great, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Are we resuming the earlier matter? Through you, Mr. Chair, I have spoken to the city solicitor, and she has advised that the 2 matters are unrelated. The committee is free to proceed with a committee of adjustment application dealing with the height and the setbacks, as these matters have no bearing on the lane issue. It's a matter that is between the applicant and the city, or not the applicant, the adjacent property owner and the city.
Okay, so we're going to reconvene this one. Here we go. And we're going to call out the application 2018-078, 120, 130, 140 King Street, and 31 West, 31 Young Street, and 55 Duke Street West again. So anybody in support or opposition, please? Okay, just to keep this rolling, what we're going to do is, Kevin, we're going to have you run through the application first, okay? And then once you're done that, then we're going to step it over to the opposition to hear from him, okay?
Sounds good, Mr. Chair. I have some plans I can distribute probably to make the discussion a little easier. So just in the way of background for this, as I mentioned, this is the second phase of the city center project. First phase was a 17-story apartment building that's essentially constructed at sort of the top right of the image that you have in front of you. There's three plans in front of you. The first is a site plan application that is currently in process with the city. It was originally submitted in February of 2018. It's gone through a series of the first set of circulation and commenting, and there was a comprehensive revision to the site plan drawing based on those comments, which is now back with the city for consideration. So the plan in front of you is the revised plans that are currently being considered by the city as part of that application. The second page, which is A405 in the bottom right corner, this is a cross-section profile of the proposed development. King Street being on the left side of the image, rising up to Duke on the right side. And then lastly is A406, which is the Duke-facing side of the development. So the phase 2 development essentially is sort of a T-shaped building with sort of the head of the T fronting and facing onto King Street. That's proposed as a 5-story development with a double-story equivalent height retail floor on the ground floor. And it rises into the back as a podium, rising up to what is a 23-story tower that is situated perpendicular to King Street. The applications, there were 4 variances that came out of the site plan approval process through that circulation. The first 2 are related to height. The D1 zone doesn't have generally a maximum building height, except for 2 provisions that are context specific. The first is related to a 45-degree angular plane from the far side of King Street. The second is related to essentially the podium height within 6 meters of King Street. On image A405, the second page, there's a faint red line that essentially shows that angular plane. So what the minor variances are asking for is an increase in height within that angular plane. So essentially it's a 52-degree angular plane rather than a 45-degree, and essentially cuts off sort of a very tip or corner of the top 4 stories. This was sort of the need for this angular plane relief was largely from a shifting of the building through the site plan approval process. The first set of comments from the circulation process requested us address the tall building design guidelines. So this building was essentially picked up and moved 6 meters closer to King Street, away from the properties, the abutting properties at Duke and Ontario. And so it was exacerbated by that fact, that an increase for a higher angular plane, essentially. The second variance is related to just the height on the King Street facing portion. And so anything within 6 meters, the zoning calls for a 12-meter height. We're asking for a 17.25-meter height. This is largely a function of the site. It's a very irregular shape of a site, as well as the grades drop substantially from Duke down to King. So it essentially drops 2 stories as you move across the site from Duke to King Street. And so essentially the purpose of the design of the site is essentially to have a flat podium that the tower sits upon. So looking at Duke Street, the podium looks to be 4 stories, whereas you look at King Street, it's a 6-story building in appearance. So that is the nature of that requested relief. The last 2, the third variance relates to a transparency requirement in the D1 zoning. As part of the development, the original Forsyth facade from the original factory has been maintained. It's going to be reclad essentially on the Duke Street facing side. And essentially the transparency is going to be that historic facade. So we've asked for essentially a forgiveness or an exemption from that 50% requirement, given that the transparency is already established by that facade. And fourth is related to a parking variance. Essentially the site plan is showing 3 spots shy of the required one space per unit. What is being asked for is to provide a little flexibility through the site plan approval process in case the parking garage does change marginally.
Thank you very much. Is there any questions from the committee members at this time? Okay, seeing none, we're going to go to the opposition. Mr. Kelly.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I assume that our submissions have been circulated to the members.
Mm-hmm.
So our client's opposition is laid out in respect of the height element of this particular application, clearly in Mr. Bosefield's letter that is attached to Schedule A to this particular submission. And one of the difficulties is that our client's property is at 45 Duke and this property is at 55 Duke, and the result of the height is that the proponent's design is 9.3 meters, whereas our analysis with respect to that should be 17.5 meters from the property line. And as a result of that, you're looking at an 88% reduction or deviation from the city's guidelines for tower separation. Our client, no doubt you're aware, has proposals before the city and has reviewed them with the city with respect to his intended development of the site at 45 Duke Street. The difficulty that this creates is that he's not going to be, or the company is not going to be able to avail itself of any similar type of relief. In fact, this will effectively eliminate the potential for that type of relief with respect to the development of his site. And that's laid out in the Bosfield letter, and I refer you to that Bosfield letter in particular with respect to tower separation and with respect to the tall building guidelines. The second part of the objection is we're moving through into the development phase, and historically our client operates the Capitol Theatre, or what was the Capitol Theatre, and in the context of the sale of the Lyric Theatre lands to the City of Kitchener, the City of Kitchener covenanted and entered into an agreement to deal with the what amounts to an easement for access to the Capitol Theatre. And the difficulty that's presented there is historically that has been used for 50-foot trailers and roughly 25-foot tractors to haul in stage equipment and the like for concerts and things of that nature at the Capitol Theatre. And specifically provided in the sale of the lands, the Lyric lands, what I call the old Lyric lands, and I grew up in downtown Kitchener, so I know them pretty well. The old Lyric lands was that there would be access for our client with respect to the Capitol Theatre, both in respect of the operations of the Capitol Theatre, which regularly require tractor trailers to arrive the back door there and halfway up between King and Duke, and then there's just no possibility for those tractor trailers to drive up from King Street along the existing easement and then back out, which is the whole purpose of the negotiated deal. The bigger problem is in the wording of the commitment and the covenant entered into by the City of Kitchener, which directly affects this particular application that's before you. And I wish to take you to that wording because it's important. And you'll see that the wording is reproduced from the agreement of purchase and sale that is attached as Schedule B to the submission. And if you go to the highlighted section, you'll see that that highlighted section is reproduced at the second page of our submission. And then it just should be noted that there's a provision in that agreement of purchase and sale that the provision referred to as item 12 the one we're speaking of now, did not merge on closing of the transaction and survived the completion. So it's still in effect. And in fact, the city has been providing ingress and egress from the site or to the site since the, and actually before, but since the sale of the lands, the Lyric lands to the city back on March 11th, 2002. So there's ongoing commitment to provide access. It's not just provide vehicular access, it's provide vehicular access that is usable. And it's not, you're not driving a smart car up that alleyway, you're driving a somewhere between a 70 and 75 foot tractor trailer on a regular basis. That's vehicular access that was always there, that's vehicular access that continues. I take you to the provisions of that specific covenant that the City of Kitchener entered into and has not yet dealt with. It says, the buyer, which is the City of Kitchener, agrees to allow the seller vehicular access to the rear of the Capitol Theatre, 90 King Street West, from Duke Street until a new access is determined at the discretion of the buyer in consultation with the seller. So that hasn't happened at all since March 11th, 2002, notwithstanding my client's efforts to make that happen. But it goes on to say something far more important for the purposes of this committee. It says the buyer will ensure that any development, and I emphasize any development, of the subject properties, being the Lyric lands, which are now in the hands of the applicant here today, and are part of this application today, of the subject properties by themselves, that's referring to the City of Kitchener, or others, that's the applicant, will consider and provide for vehicular access to and proper fire escape provisions for the Capitol Theatre. That hasn't been done, period. So this application, with the greatest respect, is premature until they can come to an agreement on the new access. It says the new access is determined. It's not. Now, the problem that I see with this, there's a greater problem that I see with this. I'm not sure that perhaps the wording may not have been the best, and sometimes we all put in writing what we may not necessarily be thinking in actuality. But if I take you to Ms. Ladd's letter, which is attached to Schedule C, if I take you just through the highlighted parts, but the whole paragraph, I just would like to point out what I think may be an unfortunate inconsistency in this letter with respect to the actual contractual obligations that the City of Kitchener owes to Mr. DeBattista, in fact, the numbered company. And the Capitol Theatre is now, at this time, is called the Elements. But she says, with regard to your concern for the right-of-way from King Street to the rear of Elements, as we discussed last year, this right-of-way is identified in both the terms of reference for the center block project and the Andron proposal for the site. The terms of reference identifying that right-of-way is available for your review at the city's website. The right-of-way is part of the lands to be conveyed to Andron. So as I say, that if we take it back to that previous provision, development by themselves, that is the City of Kitchener, or others, that's Andron. And as such, the lands will be conveyed to such right-of-way, let me back that up. The right-of-way is part of the lands to be conveyed to Andron, and as such, the lands will be conveyed subject to such right-of-way, and therefore legally Andron has no right to obstruct it in any way. Although it is a requirement of law, this item is also to be specifically addressed in the development agreement. Therefore, your access to that right-of-way is secure. That's not the obligation that the City of Kitchener covenanted for. It's not even close. The problem that I've identified, and in fact, if you take this letter in the context of the actual obligation that arises in the agreement of purchase and sale, it basically says it's not our problem anymore. It's Andron's problem, and we'll deal with it in a development agreement. But that's not what that covenant says. That covenant says any development will not take place until this issue of access to the Capitol Theatre is dealt with, and it isn't. So the objections, the two objections, or two primary areas of objection, are set out in our submissions. But our broader submission is this, and it's quite simple. This application should be delayed to give the parties an opportunity to finalize and, quote, determine, end quote, as required in this covenant of the city. If it's not, every day that it moves closer to development is a day closer to litigation. And that is not my client's intent, and that is not my client's desire. But my client does not want this development to proceed, and contractually, he has a right for it not to proceed until the rights and the nature of the easement is determined. And they're not. So if you grant this particular request today, you will be placing the city in a breach of that particular contractual obligation, of which Ms. Ladd has acknowledged there's an obligation there. And I don't think anybody's suggesting there isn't. In fact, the tractor trailers are going through there. The tractor trailers are going through there to this very day. But it's now push comes to shove, and the city has an obligation to deal with its covenants that it made in connection with the sale of, or the purchase of Lyric Theatre lands, which is now conveyed to Andron for the purposes of developing Center Block. Nobody's confused about the desire of the city to develop the Center Block. That's been on the radar for a long time in downtown Kitchener. However, it simply can't go ahead in breach of its legal obligations with respect to this particular development. Subject to any questions you may have, Mr. Chair, those are my submissions.
Great, thank you very much. Julianne, would you like to speak to that a little bit, just to kind of give us the city's position, if there is one?
I believe I stated at the beginning that I sought legal counsel's advice. The two matters are unrelated in counsel's opinion. If you would rather have the city solicitor come and speak to you, that is at your discretion. The matter before the Committee of Adjustment has to do with the height and the angular plane. The angular plane is not something that is obstructing or in any way affecting the adjacent lane and the functionality of that lane. And the other variance was for the facade openings. I think Mr. Muir mentioned transparency. It's really a regulation regarding facade opening requirement. And the reason why we have that is because we want to be able to animate and activate the streetscape. And we like to have facades along our main streets on the ground level that are allowed for that transparency and visibility into the uses, for instance, restaurants and other businesses that are along there. As part of the requirement for this redevelopment, the heritage attribute of the former Foresight building, which in this case is a facade, was retained, and that is going to be incorporated in this redevelopment. So it's impossible for them to meet that particular regulation, because the facade openings of the facade from the former Foresight factory does not align with the current zoning requirements, because the building predates any of the zoning regulations that were instituted back in 1985. And the other variance that is being sought is with respect to a slight reduction in the parking instead of 1 space per unit to a ratio of 0.95 spaces per unit. So those are the matters before the committee today that I'd be happy to speak to if you need any further clarification. Oh, and I think there was a facade height, a slight increase in the facade height for the podium-based building because it's within 6 meters of King Street. That's another regulation. But just to put it in perspective, that same height would likely, if we were not to consider that, buildings such as, say, the Walper, for instance, which is an existing building, probably would also be in that relative height. So it is the height we can probably agree with along King Street is somewhat irregular, but generally ranges between 3 and 6 stories along King Street proper. So.
Thank you very much. You have any questions?
I have one quick interim question. I'm hoping to hear that Mr. Chair, eventually hear from the applicant on this. On this particular issue. But first of all, I'm just wondering about the public. Have there been previous public processes associated with this development, or is this the first time this matter has come through a public process?
If it's all right with you, through you, Mr. Chair, yes, there has a similar variance was issued for the subject lands for this property with an earlier design concept. The design has evolved since then, and we had to come back to the committee with this new design to ensure that it too will comply, because the earlier decision was tied specifically to that design, and this design is now slightly different. And well, actually, not slightly. It is different than the previous design, and therefore they have to come back and ensure that they comply with the zoning regulations.
Thank you. And through you, Mr. Chair, was the opposition, the owner of 45 Duke, involved in that previous public process?
I'm not aware. I wasn't counsel at the time. I would suspect the answer to that would be yes, however, given Mr. DiBattista's involvement in the downtown core, and in particular his interest in this particular project because of the covenants that the city's entered into.
Kevin, would you like to speak to some of these concerns?
I can certainly, I think, speak to the minor variance aspects of it, and from Andrew can certainly speak to the sort of the access issue of the matter. I think the matter in question is that the variances that are being requested are not relating to some of the concerns that are being addressed from the opposition. There's a height maximum in place. If we were to pull the building entirely to the east side or to the Duke side of the site, we would not need any height relief for the tower. We would be within the angular plane from King Street, and we would not need a minor variance in that regard. The parking is entirely underground. There's no impact whatsoever in terms of other properties. The Duke Street facade opening requirement is simply to address that there's a heritage conservation effort, and the transparency is going to be what's there already on the heritage facade. And the last variance relates solely to King Street. It doesn't relate to any properties to the east. The tower angular plane, again, is also to King Street. There's no regulations concerning tower setbacks to the properties to the east. Having said that, the tall building guidelines obviously were referenced in the opposition's submission. These are certainly something that we're going through the site plan approval process. In our mind, that's the appropriate place to consider these guidelines. It is very difficult, I think, for any of these urban properties within downtown Kitchener to achieve everything within the design guidelines. So it's really a balancing act on some of these things. The applicant, Andren, has addressed city comments for the tall building guidelines by essentially taking the building and shifting it towards King Street by an additional 6 meters, which provides some of that additional relief from the overlook between the properties, as well as, to a certain degree, the physical separation. So the tall building guidelines are being reflected within the revised submission. the guidelines themselves simply say, not every situation can achieve all the design guidelines, so it's really a balancing act. And I think in the submission, as being currently reviewed by the city, is more in line with the design guidelines than the original.
Thank you very much. Julianne?
I could just add to Mr. Muir's comments. It was at the request of the city that the building was shifted closer to King. Mr. Muir is correct in saying that, and the intent was to provide for greater separation between the two properties. Although, and Mr. Muir is correct in saying that the tall building guidelines, within its contents, definitely says that you cannot always achieve every single guideline. But we do our best to balance and hopefully achieve overall the intent of the guidelines, which is to address issues like overlook, tower separation. The tower separation on-site is being met. The question is off-site, there is a reduced setback. That is, but because it is not a regulation in a zoning bylaw, it is something that we deal with through the tall building guidelines, and which provides some flexibility when we're reviewing site plans. Certainly, staff, we make our best efforts to try and ensure as many of the objectives of the tall building guidelines are being maintained.
Thank you.
Oh, and
I have a quick question. The opposition has noted that they talk about proper fire escape provisions from the Capitol Theatre. It looks to me as on the site plan, the existing laneway is being maintained. So we have, I don't know how the fire escape would be conflicted then. I'm not seeing that picture from the opposition side of things, because it appears to me that the fire escape is being or the existing access that is currently on the property is being maintained, correct? From what the site plan shows me. So maybe you could elaborate what the access for fire escape provisions for the Capitol Theatre. I don't understand what those concerns are.
The concerns with respect to that is not simply access to King Street; it's access to Duke Street as well, and that's why, in leaving that aside, because currently the access that's been provided is from Yonge and Duke. You can't get a 70 or a 75-foot tractor trailer out King, or out that access to King. You can't get it in and you can't get it out. It just doesn't go in there. And that was the whole purpose of this. But beyond that, it's a precursor to this development. It says that the city will not permit any development by itself or anybody else until this is determined, and it's not determined, which seems, it absolutely prevents this from happening until such time as this has been resolved, and it hasn't been resolved by any stretch of the imagination.
Mr. Chair, through you to either the applicant or the opposition. Okay, actually, maybe to Mr. Kelly. Does your client at this point have the ability to take a medium to large size truck from King Street through to Duke?
No.
But that was...
No, the access is going through right now, the access being used. I think what the city thinks might happen is that my client's existing easement is the access that he's ultimately going to end up with. But the problem with that is, one, that wasn't the contractual covenant the city entered into. It's providing access from Duke. And you can't back a 75-foot trailer down beside the Capitol Theatre and onto King Street. So either it's got to back in or it's got to back out. You can't do either. So he doesn't have vehicular access to the rear of the Capitol Theatre. And vehicular access would include all vehicles, all road vehicles.
I noticed in the site plan, is the access easement located on the site plan that's currently provided to the neighboring property? I'd just like to see where this access easement is. I don't know if I can't see it on any of the mapping or anything like that. If you have a copy of the survey, maybe.
The current site plan doesn't show it just shows the existing laneway, but not the easement boundaries.
Mr. Chair, there's also another important point to mention, that these site plans, although currently being reviewed by staff, have not been approved by staff yet. We're in the process of reviewing, and these variances were flagged as part of that process. With respect to the easement, it's certainly something that is on staff's radar, but I still don't feel at this point in time that it's affected by the variances that are being sought. They are unrelated. That there is still an outstanding issue with the adjacent property owner regarding this matter, I'm not disputing that, but it's not related to the variances that are being sought today.
Mr. Chair, through you to staff, it's your position that although there may be some concerns over the easement, these minor variances will have no impact on that easement and its potential differences of opinion between two neighbors.
Yes, that's my position, and that was through consultation with our solicitor. The matters before the committee are unrelated to the easement and or any promises of access and what have you that happened in the past. It's a matter that is going to be dealt with through our legal department with the adjacent landowner.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I accept the advice of the city solicitor as it's been conveyed through planning staff, through Ms. Von Westerholt, and I think this is a good application. I agree with the submissions that were made by the applicant and Ms. Von Westerholt, and I don't see how the concern, which was brought before us very late in the process, is necessarily tied to the approval here today. So I'm prepared to make a motion to approve the application.
This is a complicated concern, exacerbated by the fact that we didn't get the objections until this morning. It would have given us an opportunity to investigate the downtown center block core and easements a little further. Mr. Kelly, who's representing his client, well-known person within the community, largely, I understand, is largely access. But that's a separate issue. It would have been nice if this could have been resolved beforehand. It's always nice to work with your neighbors. Staff will agree with that. From my study of the application and staff's input, I don't see how these variances will impact the issue of the easement. That's a separate concern. As I said, it would have been nice to have had that resolved before this meeting, but it isn't resolved. I appreciate Mr. Kelly's concern and his client's concern, but we aren't here to, there's nothing in the application dealing with the easement. We're here to either approve or not approve some minor variances to allow this development to go forward. So Ms. Meter has made a motion to approve this.
I move to approve this application as subject to the conditions set out in the staff report.
Mr. Chair, just 2 seconds. Moving forward on applications such as this, I encourage all parties to, and staff as well, to sit down and work these complications out before it comes to the committee. Having said that, I will second Ms. Meter's motion to approve this as per the staff report.
I concur with my colleagues. I think that the variances are in keeping and with what the Committee of Adjustment is here for. I would really have liked to have seen the variance for access. It is a legal binding document, so I think you're going to be protected that way. There is a process. Staff is made aware of these concerns for access and for pedestrian and fire safety, as well as vehicular access, that they're going to be dealing with through site plan control. We do not have a final site plan in front of us. It makes it very difficult to be put any weight behind it until it is approved in principle. I'm sure that you do know the due course of that your client can take for any further action if he wishes to pursue it. Maybe some consultations with the applicants might make things a little bit easier to provide a greater understanding. Seeing that, I'm going to say all in favor. Okay, so it is. Thank you.
Thank you.